Hi friends, Kim Schofield back with another video on my YouTube channel. Today I'm going to be making a really large card. It's about 7.5 inches tall, using some products from the Crafters Workshop and a bunch of other manufacturers that I will talk about as we go through the video. So I just have a heavy piece of cardstock here, and it is about 7 inches tall. And I'm using the Crafters Workshop Light and Fluffy Modeling Paste along with one of their newest stencils. And I'll have links to all the products below in the description. So I'm just using my palette knife to put some of the paste on, and I'm covering just about all of this piece of cardstock. And then I'll just pick that up, and I want to remove all of the excess from my nonstick craft sheet, and also just run my knife along the edges to get up all of that extra paste. And so you'll see the paper bows up a little bit, but once it's completely dry, it will lie flat. So of course I want to go ahead and clean off all the paste from my stencil, my craft sheet, and my palette knife, because if we don't, it will dry like concrete. You can't get it off. You also might want to run your palette knife around anything that's up around the edge of the jar that holds the paste, because sometimes the paste that's up towards the top of the lid there can dry out a little bit. So you kind of want that down inside the jar. And then I am actually going to heat set this, which works fine. You just want to keep your heat tool moving and not stay in one place for too long. So I am back again with these glimmer mists. I can't stop myself. I absolutely love them. And they do a great job with the paste. And apparently pink and yellow is my thing, because that's all I keep making are projects with pink and yellow. I love them. I love these two colors together. And the little bit of shimmer that you get from the glimmer mist is beautiful. So I am using my heat tool just to move that ink around a little bit. I'm spraying it on pretty heavily, and so not only do I want to dry that, but I also want to move that around so it's not too blotchy, so it's kind of blending into each area. So, and these will react with water again. I don't think that they're completely permanent when they're dry. I could be wrong. I'll have to check that out. I don't think they are. I think they will react with water even after they're dry. Probably not. It'd be more challenging to get them to react too much on top of the paste, because that paste really grabs the color and kind of holds on to it. But you wouldn't want to wet this down too much or go over it too heavily with a baby wipe or anything like that. So I am bringing in some of the blue. But again, that reaction, re-wetting the pink and the yellow that's down there, kind of made it a little too muddied. So I didn't do too much of that. So I'm just going around my edges with, shocking, I know, brown ink. I am using archival ink because I'm going on top of another medium, and archival really is the best option for this. Distress ink won't show up very well on there. So just a little bit around the edge of that. Look at that shimmer. Woo! Fabulous. All right, so I have a whole bunch of pieces that I've die cut from chipboard, and all of these dies are from Tim Holtz. Again, those links will be below. And so now I'm kind of laid out how I wanted everything, where I wanted placement on this piece of cardstock. And I'm using some of the new Crafters Workshop paint. This is the iridescent silver, and I'm going to paint my clock. Just going around the edge. Of course, it doesn't matter what the middle looks like there, because I've already die cut a piece of vintage text that's going to go in the middle. I love this clock die. It's almost like a clock or a gigantic pocket watch. But it's so versatile. You can put photos in the middle of this or anything. I love this thing. I use it a lot. And I'm going around the edges just to make sure I don't have that cardboard showing through. And then I'll set that aside to dry. The silver color, these iridescent silver and gold colors from the Crafters Workshop are beautiful. And these are awesome paints, really heavy bodied. So I just had some extra paint there, and I've got a journal, and I'm just scribbling that extra paint in there just so I don't waste it. And I'll do something with that at some point. Beautiful colors. And I'm just drying that before I put it aside so the pages don't stick. And then, of course, cleaning up my excess paint with a baby wipe. Baby wipes are your best friend when you are art journaling. So now I am using some Tombow liquid glue. This stuff rocks. I love this glue. Holds like nobody's business. And I'm using my finger just to move that glue around so I make sure it goes all the way out to the edges so the pieces of my vintage text don't pick up, especially because it's very thin. It's very delicate. It tears really easily. So I'm just going to give that a little bit of a dry before I go on to my next step. So the next thing I'm going to do is kind of age this up a little bit, and I'm using black archival ink, and this really gives it that look of metal, a little bit more of a kind of a distressed metal look. You can see the way that looks there. And I don't have a ton of the metallic paint showing, but I'll go around all the edges with that black and kind of up towards the top of the watch there. So now I'm going to get working on coloring my other pieces of chipboard. And you know, these colors are going to be muted because I'm working on a craft chipboard. I'm kind of checking my colors. I don't want this background piece to be competing necessarily with the colors that are on the tag. So I'm not trying to do a high contrast. I'm actually trying to keep my colors complementary. So in the yellow, orange, and red color. And then I am going to use some of these little teeny pieces that also die cut when you cut this entire lattice piece out. Those are the little middle pieces. So I'm going to use just a few of those. And you see I have some of those Prima pieces in the background there, and I actually ended up not using those at all, but I wasn't sure what I was going to do. So I'm adding another layer just because the chipboard does tend to soak up that distress ink, and so I just wanted it to be a little bit darker. And then I decided, which I kind of wish I hadn't done this, but I did it, because I wasn't sure what I was going to do in the center there. So I wanted to tone down my text so it wasn't so stark. And so just a little layer of gesso. This is actually the Crafter's Workshop gesso. I just have it in a pourable jar instead of the wide mouth jar, just because it's easier to get a small amount out on my craft sheet. And then I kind of like that gesso, and I went a little crazy with it, but I kind of wish I hadn't, and you'll see why later in the video. But everything worked out okay in the end. I have a teeny tiny stamp. This is from a very older, much older Wendy Becky stamp set, and it has a little bit of text. It kind of looks like typewriter text. I love it. So I'm just using some black archival just to add a little bit of that around, just so it's not just the color, it's got a little bit of design on there. So now I have die cut a little moon. No, well, it's not a moon, it's a circle, but it's going to be a moon. And have that off to the side, and I'm adding some distress ink in scattered straw to my background. So this is why I wish I had not put the gesso down, because distress ink stays a lot paler over a gessoed surface than if I hadn't done that. So I wasn't able to get the depth of color that I wanted to get, but it was fine. I still liked it. But you'll see with that circle that I have there, how much more of the color it picks up versus my background. So I was going for a little bit of a night sky. So I put down some Rusty Hinge, and now I'm going in with Chip Sapphire. So this is where you'll really see how much the gesso keeps those inks looking more transparent than I probably wanted. I would have liked a little more depth there. It just means I had to work at it a little bit more and add a few more layers than I would have had to add if I didn't have that gesso. So, and I can go ahead with darker shades too. So now I'm adding some seedless preserves. You can see the way the moon looks. You get a little peek there. My painter's tape gave way. And so you can really see the circle that I'm using, the die cut circle, how much darker that is. So that's what it would have looked like if I didn't have the gesso down. And then any ink that gets on the clock face around, I can just remove with a baby wipe. So I did add a teeny bit of black, just again to darken that up even more. And now I'm going to create some stars using some watered down gesso. And this is very subtle. Once this dries back, it's not super bright, but it does, you do get the hint of little stars there. And that is my finished background. And I'm just going to dry that before I move on to the next step. So now I am going to color my little bird. And again, I'm going to use the archival because the archival is a little bit darker on the chipboard than the distress inks. So I am just using, this is Tree Branch, I believe. I love this color. And just using my blending tool to apply the ink. Cleaning that up a little bit. So I have this background stamp from Wendy Vecchi. I think it's cracked glass. And I'm actually going to ink that up again with the potting soil. I think I said Tree Branch, it's potting soil. And you can just see that little bit of texture that you get on the tree branches. It makes it look like bark. It's very cool. It's very subtle. It's not, you know, screaming out. If I wanted it to be darker, I could use black. But I like that tone on tone look to it. Now it's time to color the bird, and I'm using Garden Patina. I love this color, and it's a little deeper on the craft cardstock than it would be on white, but I think it works really well. The night sky, I was almost thinking about doing the bird and the branch in black, so it had kind of a silhouette look, but I decided to add a little bit of color here, and I'm happy I added that. So now this was kind of fun. So I have this bird image. This is also a Wendy Vecchi stamp set. And I inked up just the wing there, that inside wing on the bird. And it turns out it is just about the same size as this little die cut bird. Not completely, but it's just enough that I can stamp that. Isn't that fun? The little wing on there, and it fit perfectly. Since I'm not the best drawer, I can't draw that well. This was a great way to add a little bit of decoration onto the bird that I didn't have to do myself. And then I'm just adding a little eyeball with my Copic multi-liner. And I put a few little kind of feathery things on the tail of the bird as well. So now I am ready to assemble. I'm using my Tombow glue again. This stuff is really strong, and you get a little bit of time to move something around if you want to move something around. But once it grips, and it ain't going nowhere. So I love it. So see, I've got a little bit of time there to move it over, and I am going to want to put some heavy stuff on here because it's going on top of that paste. So it needs a little bit more time. The weight of something there will help it adhere a little bit because I've got that texture going on and also the paste. So it's not going to cling quite as quickly as it would to just a plain piece of paper. But it doesn't take long. You can see in the time it took me to glue the stuff on the bottom, it's fine. It's already holding. And I'm just adding 2 more of those little cutouts, and then I will, anything that's hanging over the edge, I'll just use my scissors to remove. So I'm adding, sorry, I'm off camera there a little bit. I'm just adding some foam tape to one side of the clock because since it's going on top of this other chipboard piece, it needs something to support it on the left-hand side. So I'm just adding a little foam tape there. My heavy gesso jars again. And then I will attach my bird on the branch. And you'll see I cut some of the branch off that's hanging off on either side of the clock. I'll end up cutting that off so it all fits within the clock. So there are those little pieces, those little extras. And then I'm going to cut these off, which I probably should have done before I attached it. It was harder to do once it was on there. So now I am ready to assemble. I'm adding a piece of chipboard onto the back because this is just cardstock. So it's such a large size that it needs a little bit of that extra support. And again, I'll put something heavy there till it adheres. And now I'll put the dimensions in the description, but I cut a long piece of cardstock, and you see I scored it here. It's maybe about 1.5 inch score. And I'm adding some strong adhesive. And then I have another piece of cardstock that I'll line right up at that score line. And now I have a gigantic card. It's about 7.5 inches tall by about 4.25 wide. So it's really large. And I was thinking about putting something behind it, but then I decided I really liked the white. So I did add a few chit-chat stickers on there, and that is about it. I did use foam tape to attach the entire piece onto the cardstock. I'm not sure how I'm going to mail this. You know, it has to go in some kind of special mailer because it's so large. But I had a great time, and I love the final result. So that is it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. Feel free to visit the Crafters Workshop blog or my blog for more photos and for a list of supplies and where you can purchase them. Happy crafting!